I had always thought of myself as just another quiet girl growing up in a quiet neighborhood. I wasn't the center of attention, but I never really felt neglected either, at least not until Sierra was born. That night is burned into my memory like a scar. I was 10. The knock on my bedroom door came like thunder, loud and urgent. Aunt Lorraine's voice trembled through the wood. "Elena, honey, pack your things. Your mom's at the hospital." I sat up in bed, heart pounding. In a child's mind, hospitals meant broken bones or car crashes or those unspoken fears kids never have words for. But what happened next? It wasn't the accident that broke me. It was everything that followed. Sierra came into the world almost 2 months early. I didn't understand what premature meant then, but I could read the adults' faces. They were grim, pale, always whispering. My life blurred into long days at Aunt Lorraine's house, where I wasn't allowed to ask questions or visit the hospital more than once. And when I did, my mother barely looked at me. "Be good, Elena. Mommy's very busy," she'd whisper, her eyes fixed somewhere I couldn't follow. I started learning how to disappear. When Sierra finally came home, our house no longer felt like home. It was a sterile fortress, white walls, hand sanitizers lined up like soldiers, disinfectant in every corner. I could smell the rubbing alcohol, even in my sleep. My mother cleaned obsessively, 3 times a day, every surface. She monitored the air temperature in Sierra's room, like she was guarding nuclear codes. Her hands were red and cracked from all the washing, but she never stopped. I would have understood, maybe, if it was just about Sierra's health. But it wasn't. The moment I sneezed or coughed or even sniffled, I was sent away. Grandma Mavis's house, or just out of the room, while my mother stared at me like I was radioactive. At first, Grandma's house was a kind of refuge. She baked pies, let me help knead dough, told me stories about her childhood in New Orleans. But even at that age, I knew the truth. I wasn't being sent away because I was loved. I was sent away because I was a threat. I wasn't part of the family anymore. I was the outsider with germs. I started chasing their attention like it was oxygen. I got straight A's in school, and my mother barely looked up from her list of Sierra's vitamins. When I won the science fair, first place, renewable energy project, my father just told me to put the display board in the garage. "The cardboard might be dusty," he muttered. "Don't want Sierra sneezing." I didn't even know if that was a real reason or just another excuse to shut me out. But the worst moment came when I was 12. I had spent a whole year practicing a piano piece for the school talent show. It was the only time I'd ever felt proud of something that wasn't academic. I had imagined my parents sitting in the audience, clapping, smiling, seeing me. But the day of the show, Sierra had a mild fever, 99 degrees. Nothing dangerous, nothing serious. Still, they didn't come. "We can't risk it," my mother said. I performed to a full auditorium with not a single familiar face in the crowd. 2 weeks later, Sierra had a 10-minute flute recital. She barely knew the song. The whole family came. Both sets of grandparents clapped like she'd won a Grammy. I watched them from the back, unnoticed, my applause quiet and slow. That's when I understood. It didn't matter what I did. I would never shine as brightly as Sierra, not in their eyes. I had become a background character in my own story. I didn't hate Sierra. I hated how the world shifted its axis for her, how everything I once had was slowly stripped away to make room for the miracle baby. I learned early that no matter how loud I screamed inside, no one would hear me. So I stopped screaming. I grew quiet, learned how to observe, how to wait, how to take every ounce of pain and file it into something sharper. There was only one person who didn't treat me like I was disposable: Grandma Mavis. Every time I was sent away for a sniffle or because Sierra had a big test and needed silence, Mavis welcomed me without question. Her house smelled like cinnamon and lavender. Her living room was filled with shelves of old books, glass display cases, and velvet-lined boxes containing jewelry that shimmered in ways I'd never seen. One rainy afternoon, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, holding a strange hairpin with delicate engravings. I asked what it was. This, she said, holding it out with reverence, is a Victorian mourning piece. Handmade. Look here, the clasp, that's a jeweler's hallmark. No machine could create these details. I ran my fingers along the cool metal. For the first time, I felt something click. Not just admiration, but a pull. That day, she began teaching me, slowly, patiently, how to feel real gold by its weight, how to recognize the way natural pearls shimmer compared to synthetic ones, how the cut of a diamond could tell you the decade it was crafted. I soaked up every word like it was oxygen. The world she opened to me felt secret, sacred, and, most of all, mine. Back at home, it didn't matter. No one cared that I could appraise a brooch better than some antique dealers. My talents were treated like quirks, annoyances. If I aced an exam, it was expected. You have nothing to worry about, my mother would say. If Sierra brought home a C+, it was cause for celebration. Cake, balloons, tears of joy. It was laughable and heartbreaking. So I stopped waiting for recognition. I buried myself in books, not just because I loved learning, but because it was my way out. I joined every club I could, debate team, student council, school newspaper. I worked part-time at a small cafe, saving every dollar in a tattered envelope I kept hidden behind an old biology textbook. Teen came to Suts. I didn't just do well. I scored a perfect 1600. I stared at the number on the screen for 5 full minutes, hand over my mouth, tears burning behind my eyes. I ran downstairs, heart pounding. Mom, I said breathlessly, I got a perfect score on the SATs. She didn't even look up. That's nice, Elena, she said, brushing Sierra's hair. Can you vacuum the living room when you're done? Sierra smirked. Wow, someone thinks she's special. I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I just walked back upstairs and closed the door. That night, I filled out every scholarship application I could find. Alone. I researched FAFSA by myself. I wrote essays at 2 a.m. and triple-checked every line of every form. I didn't tell anyone when the acceptance letter came, or when the full-ride scholarship to UC Berkeley arrived, covering tuition, housing, books, even travel. At dinner, I simply said, I got a full ride to Berkeley. My mother frowned. Berkeley? That's so far. Sierra's going to miss you. Sierra didn't even hide her grin. Great. I'm taking your room. I need more space for my TikTok setup. On move-in day, no one came. No hugs, no photos, no tears. Only Aunt Lorraine showed up, slipping a small envelope into my hand. Your grandmother left this for you, she whispered. It was $500 in crisp bills, wrapped in a piece of silk. She believed in you. I didn't speak, just hugged her. And I made myself a promise right there in that parking lot, suitcase in hand, watching other families swarm their kids with love and pride. I would never come back empty-handed. College was the first time I could breathe. No whispers about Sierra's allergies. No glances that said I was an inconvenience. Just me, my books, and a city that didn't care who I used to be. I majored in art history with a focus on antique appraisal. Most people raised an eyebrow when I told them, but I didn't care. I had a vision, even if no one else could see it. I worked 3 part-time jobs. Weekends were spent cataloging dusty donations at a local museum. Nights, I cleaned offices. Early mornings, I made coffee at a sleepy diner down the hill from campus. I was always exhausted, always broke, but I was finally building something of my own. Quietly, relentlessly. After graduation, I landed a job at a mid-sized auction house in San Francisco that specialized in rare jewelry collections. It wasn't glamorous. I spent most days cataloging chipped rings and broken lockets people dropped off without a second thought. The office smelled like metal and mothballs. I was the new girl, invisible again just like at home, until the brooch. It was an ugly little thing, dismissed by a senior appraiser as costume jewelry. But something felt wrong. The engraving was too intricate, the clasp too delicate. It had weight, history. I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I did what Grandma Mavis had taught me. I studied. I cross-referenced old archives, studied Hallmark databases, even emailed a retired European jeweler I found in a dusty forum. 2 days later, I had the truth. It wasn't fake. It was an authentic French Art Nouveau piece from 1901, a rare mourning brooch, handcrafted by a master who died during the war. Estimated value, $58,000. I brought it to my director, nervous but steady. Are you sure? He asked, half amused. I laid out my notes, my sources, my research, my conviction. 3 weeks later, the brooch sold for $61,200 at auction. For the first time in my life, someone looked at me and truly saw me. After that, things changed. I wasn't just the quiet girl in the back room anymore. I got bigger assignments, was trusted with more valuable pieces. High-profile clients began requesting me by name. My commissions grew. I started receiving invitations to private estate viewings, exclusive networking events, even advisory roles in restoration projects. I was, in every sense of the word, becoming an expert. And yet, my family still knew nothing. Every time I visited home, they treated me like the Elena who'd left with a dusty suitcase. Still working at that little antique shop? My mother would ask between bites of overcooked meatloaf. Yeah, still the same, I'd reply. She nodded, satisfied. Well, at least you're stable. Sierra would roll her eyes. You should get a real job someday. I'd smile and say nothing, because that very morning I had signed a $200,000 authentication contract with a private collector in Dubai. But something started gnawing at me. No matter how many six-figure deals I closed, how many rare gems I identified, how many industry awards I collected, the truth was glaring. I was still making someone else rich. The auction house took the glory, the lion's share, the name recognition. I was just a cog. A valuable cog, yes, but a cog nonetheless. One night, I stayed late, sitting under the dim yellow light of my office lamp, looking at my earnings spreadsheet. The math didn't lie. If I had my own company, even a modest one, I could double my income, triple my control, and finally build something truly mine. It sounded crazy, but so did leaving home at 18 with nothing but a scholarship and grandma's silk-wrapped envelope. So I did it. I withdrew every dollar I had, took out a modest business loan, rented a tiny office in the Mission District, barely more than a storage room above a French bakery. The walls reeked of sugar and burnt almonds. The Wi-Fi barely worked. My first desk was a folding table from Goodwill. My chair? Picked off the curb, but I scrubbed it clean. I made coffee from a machine that sputtered like it was dying. And I got to work. Elena Hart Appraisal and Authentication. A name no one knew. Yet, I didn't have investors. I didn't have a marketing team or a polished website. But I had something better, reputation. Within months, local antique dealers started whispering my name. Elena Hart, the girl who didn't miss. I offered lower rates than the big firms, but my work? Impeccable. I authenticated a vintage locket dismissed as costume jewelry. It turned out to belong to a 19th century European duchess. A cracked sapphire ring? Burmese, 1854. Once misidentified, now worth $40,000. Then came the call that would change everything. A private collector contacted me about an old family jewelry collection that had been passed down for generations. He wanted it authenticated before auctioning it off, quietly, discreetly. I agreed, not knowing that 2 of the pieces inside that velvet-lined chest would become the biggest discovery of my career. For 2 weeks, I barely slept. I examined every clasp, every stone, every engraving under high-powered microscopes. I even consulted international archives and rare estate registries. When the dust finally settled, the truth was staggering. 2 pieces, long believed to be fakes, were in fact rare originals from a lost series by a Parisian master jeweler. When the collection hit the market, it sold for $918,000. My commission? 10%. $90,000. I remember sitting in my office, still that tiny, sugar-scented room with a flickering light bulb, staring at the number in my bank account. I didn't scream. I didn't even smile. I cried, not because I was weak, but because, for the first time in my life, the world had validated everything I had fought for. With that money, I moved into a real office. Functional AC, a clean lobby, a tiny showroom with black marble countertops and velvet curtains. I hired my first employee, Jenny, a soft-spoken recent gemology graduate who reminded me of me. Passionate, brilliant, ignored by everyone but those who could see. Within 2 years, we expanded to Los Angeles, then to Seattle. I became the go-to name for high-value jewelry authentication. Billionaire heirs, estate lawyers, celebrities who didn't want to get scammed. They all came to me. Some even waited months for an appointment. And yet, every time I went back to visit my family, I became Elena the Invisible again. "You're still at that little jewelry place?" my mom would ask, slicing overcooked chicken. "Still there," I'd nod. Sierra would smirk. "You should really get a job in tech. Jewelry's kinda outdated." I smiled politely, because that morning I had just closed a $480,000 contract with a Manhattan collector. They had no idea. I didn't need them to know. Until Thanksgiving. 2 weeks before, my mom called, her voice soft and oddly fragile. "Elena, I'm just so tired. Cooking for the family is too much this year. My back, it's gotten worse." I paused. I had a major auction lined up that weekend. But I also knew the script. If I refused, I'd be branded the ungrateful daughter. Again. So I said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of everything." I didn't just cook. I curated. I hired one of the most elite catering services in San Francisco, the same team I used for corporate events. They prepared a 5-course Michelin-level feast. Truffle-stuffed turkey, sage-roasted vegetables, artisanal pumpkin tarts. It cost more than 2 months of Sierra's salary, but I didn't blink. I just wanted one peaceful evening. Of course, peace was never an option in my family. The moment dinner was served, Sierra sneered. "You ordered takeout? Wow, couldn't even make stuffing." I swallowed hard, fingers tightening around my wine glass. This came from a girl who once set off the smoke alarm microwaving oatmeal. My mother rushed to defuse the tension. "It's different this year, but let's be grateful we have a meal." I said nothing. I didn't need their thanks. I had outgrown it. Sierra spent the next hour bragging about her marketing job, which, from what I could gather, involved printing flyers and fetching coffee for her boss. My parents nodded with admiration as if she had just launched a Fortune 500 company. I just smiled and nodded, letting her bask in the spotlight. Because earlier that day, I had signed a $500,000 authentication contract with a European collector. They could have their illusions. I had reality. But what I didn't expect was what happened after dessert. After dinner, I slipped upstairs to my old bedroom, the same room Sierra had tried to claim the moment I left for college. I had kept it minimal, untouched. There was something oddly poetic about checking on a $500,000 auction contract from a childhood bed that still had glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. I opened my laptop, logged into my secure portal, and began reviewing details for an Art Nouveau necklace up for bidding in Hong Kong. One of my VIP clients was waiting for authentication before placing a 7-figure offer. My fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating between gemology reports, provenance scans, and past valuations. I was in my zone, focused, precise, unstoppable, until the door creaked open. "Sierra, do you have a phone charger?" she asked casually. But her eyes weren't on me. They were locked onto my screen. Before I could react, she stepped forward and snatched my laptop right off the desk. "What the hell are you doing?" I snapped, lunging after her, but she had already turned the screen toward herself and froze. There it was, my main account, $18.3 million. Her face paled instantly, then twisted into something ugly, hungry, wild, greedy. "What the hell is this?" she stammered. "Whose account is this? This isn't real. You don't actually have this kind of money, do you?" I reached for the laptop, but she spun away and bolted downstairs. "Sierra, give it back." But she was already shouting at the top of her lungs. Everyone come here right now. You're not going to believe this. Elena is a freaking millionaire." The room fell into stunned silence. Forks clinked onto plates. My father stood up slowly. My mother stared, wide-eyed. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs, heart hammering. Sierra spun the screen toward them. "She's been hiding it. $18 million. While we've been struggling, while Mom's back is falling apart, while I'm drowning in student debt. She has $18 million. I stood frozen, breath caught in my throat. My mother dropped her napkin. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Elena, is this true?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My father's expression hardened. "We raised you. You owe this family." I felt the shift in the air. The moment admiration curdled into entitlement. Sierra flipped her hair back, voice dripping with mock sweetness. "I'm not asking for much. Just like $2 million. That's all. A fresh start. Maybe a condo near the coast. Nothing crazy." My mother chimed in without missing a beat. "And your father and I have been thinking about a small place in Florida. A retirement home. 3 million tops. You can afford that, can't you?" I looked around the table. Faces I had once begged to notice me. Now they stared at me like vultures. Not a single congratulations. Not even a "how did you do it?" Only hunger, greed, expectation. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Wow, so that's what I'm worth to you." My father's voice turned stern. "It's not about worth. It's about responsibility. We're family." I slowly set down my wine glass, stood tall, and locked eyes with all of them. My voice was ice. "I've been sending $7,000 a month into your account for the past 2 years. Quietly, anonymously. You never had to sell the house because of me." Silence. My mother blinked. What did you just say?" I turned to Sierra. "Funny though. I guess it was easy to take the credit when you thought I'd never speak up." Her face twisted. "That's not true." "Oh, it is. You looked me in the eye and let them believe it was you." My father clenched his jaw. My mother went pale. I could see the fear creeping in, the realization that I had never truly needed them, that they had needed me all along. I reached for my laptop, placed it back in my bag, and picked up my purse, the designer one my mother once sneered at as a cheap knockoff. And then I turned to them one last time. "No more. Not another cent. This family is no longer my responsibility." My mother's mouth opened, but no words came out. Sierra stared, stunned. My father looked like a man watching a fortune slip through his fingers. And I walked out, heels clicking on the tile like gunfire. I didn't look back. By the time I got back to my penthouse, the first message had already arrived. 7:42 p.m. "Mom, how could you do this to your family? We raised you." Then came another. 8:15 p.m. "Dad, let's be reasonable and talk like adults. Family is important, Elena." 9:30 p.m. "Sierra, you have all that money and you're being this selfish? I'm your sister." 11 p.m. "Mom, again, we found a perfect house in Naples. Just $3 million. You could change our lives." I didn't answer a single one. Then came the post. A screenshot forwarded by Jenny with the subject line, "You need to see this." Sierra's Facebook update read like a script from a bad soap opera. My millionaire sister hid her fortune for years while our parents struggled, and I sank in student debt. I've always supported her, and this is how she treats her family. Heartless, cold, unbelievable. Within hours, the comments flooded in. Aunt Denise, wow, always knew something was off about Elena. Cousin Margot, If I had $18 million, I'd help my parents instead of abandoning them. A random classmate from middle school. Not surprised. She was always distant. I let out a cold laugh. Where were these people when I was eating instant noodles alone in a dorm with no heating? When I was working 3 jobs while Sierra shopped online with Mom's credit card? Now they had opinions. Now they wanted their piece of the story. But I didn't block them. That would give them power. Instead, I went dark. No responses. No public statements. No explanations. And that silence, it drove them insane. 2 days passed. Then 3. The calls didn't stop. My email inbox filled with subject lines like, "We need to talk. You'll regret this. Please, for the family." Sierra even created a second Facebook post, claiming I had emotionally abused her and lied about giving money to our parents. There was a dramatic picture of her crying on her bed, caption, "Betrayed by blood." I didn't flinch, but I knew something bigger was coming. People like them, entitled, manipulative, they don't stop when ignored. They escalate, and right on cue the invasion came. Monday morning, I was reviewing an emerald collection from a royal estate in Italy when Jenny, pale and breathless, burst into my office. "Elena," she said, eyes wide, "your parents and your sister, they're downstairs." I looked up. "Calm. Do they have an appointment?" She shook her head. "Not even close. They're arguing with security." Loudly. "Your father said you owe them a meeting." Sierra's filming. I closed my laptop, stood up, smoothed my black blazer. Let's get this over with. When I stepped into the lobby, the entire room fell quiet. My father was sitting on the guest couch like he owned it, legs crossed, hands steepled. My mother had on her church face, sad, self-sacrificing, practiced. Sierra had her arms crossed, lips curled in smug defiance, and her phone tilted just enough to record. "We need to talk," my father said. His voice was low, controlled, like I was the one who owed an apology. "There's nothing left to say," I replied coolly. I made myself very clear. Sierra stepped forward. "You seriously think you can just cut off your family and keep living like this?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Are you struggling? Because that new Gucci bag says otherwise." My mother's tears came on cue. "Elena, we raised you. We sacrificed everything for you. You owe us." I didn't blink. "No," I said, voice sharp and steady. "I owe you nothing. When I needed help, college applications, rent, tuition, where were you? When I won awards, when I built this from the ground up, who showed up for me? Not once. So don't come here talking about obligation." Sierra's face flushed with rage. "You're heartless." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. With one press, I canceled every remaining automatic monthly payment that had been quietly flowing into their account. Right in front of them, my mother gasped as her phone buzzed with the notification. "You can't do this." I just did. My father stood up sharply. "You'll regret this. You're still part of this family." I turned to security. "Escort them out, and add all 3 to the do not enter list. Permanently." Sierra shouted something incoherent. My mother collapsed into sobs. My father tried to argue, but none of it mattered. They were removed, red-faced and trembling, right in front of my employees, my clients, my empire. I stood there, perfectly still, until the glass doors slid shut behind them, and I felt nothing but peace. That night, my phone rang again. I almost didn't answer, but the name flashing across the screen wasn't one I feared. Grandma Mavis. I hesitated, then picked up. Her voice, soft and warm, floated through the speaker like a blanket I hadn't known I needed. "Well done, Elena." Just those 3 words. I froze. You're not mad." She chuckled, that same low, raspy laugh that once accompanied warm cookies and secret jewelry lessons. "Mad. You're the first in this family to stand on your own. I just wish I could have seen their faces when they were dragged out of that fancy office of yours." A real smile curled across my lips. The first in days. Thank you, Grandma. You don't need to thank me, she said gently. You did what they never had the courage to do. You stopped begging to be seen. I didn't speak. My throat tightened. I always knew you'd build something extraordinary, she continued. You were never invisible to me. Silence sat between us for a moment, filled with everything I'd ever wanted to hear as a child and never did. Until now. After we hung up, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my penthouse, staring at the lights of San Francisco blinking below like stars. I thought about that old dusty room above the bakery, the folding table, the broken chair, the smell of burnt croissants in the carpet. That place wasn't much, but it had been mine, and from it I had built a kingdom. But I knew my family wasn't done. They never were. So I took precautions. The very next week I moved. My old address was too easy to find, too exposed. I rented a secured penthouse in a building with 24/7 armed security, private elevator access, and biometric locks. I changed my phone number, updated my business registry, scrubbed every trace of personal data from my social media. They couldn't reach me anymore, and still they tried. Emails from unknown addresses arrived daily. Subject lines like, "Family is still family. Please don't do this. Do you really want your mother to die without saying goodbye?" Each one more manipulative than the last. Sierra switched tactics entirely. She went public. Again, she posted long, dramatic Facebook rants about her cold-hearted sister, who had abandoned her roots. She added poetic flair. Money changes people. I miss the old Elena, before she got rich and forgot how to love. She even uploaded old childhood photos of us playing in the garden, captioned, "This girl used to be my best friend. Now she won't even answer my calls." Comments poured in from distant cousins, ex-classmates, strangers. Elena was always weird. If I had $18 million, I'd share with my family. She's disgusting, ungrateful. I read them all, and smirked. Where were these people when I was invisible? When Sierra stole my victories, and they all clapped? When I stood on that stage, 12 years old, alone in an auditorium that should have been full? They had no right to speak now. So I didn't block them. I didn't explain. I didn't reply. My silence was my answer. And the quieter I became, the louder they screamed. But something unexpected happened. One of my high-profile clients, an heiress to a French perfume empire, called me after hearing the Thanksgiving story at a gala. She didn't sound judgmental. She sounded impressed. "Most people your age would cave under that kind of pressure," she said. "But you didn't. You protected what you built." She introduced me to two other clients, one a Hollywood producer, the other an Italian diplomat's widow. Both needed appraisals. Both paid in 6 figures. The story spread, not as a scandal, but as legend. The girl who walked away from her toxic family and built an empire alone. My business skyrocketed. I opened 2 more offices, one in New York, one in Palm Beach. My team grew from 2 people to 20. We started turning down clients, not because we weren't available, but because we could afford to choose. And still, at every family dinner I missed, every wedding I wasn't invited to, every birthday I ignored, I knew they whispered my name. Not with love, with envy. Then, one morning, Jenny knocked on my office door holding her tablet like it was radioactive. "Elena, you're not going to believe this." I looked up from the necklace I was inspecting. "What is it?" She flipped the screen toward me. An article. Bold headline. "Rachel's Fine Jewels. A new name in luxury authentication." I blinked once. Twice. "Wait, Sierra," I asked, half laughing. "She opened a jewelry company." Jenny nodded, barely containing her horror and amusement. "She launched it 2 weeks ago. Website, Instagram, even a promo video. She's trying to brand herself as the new authority in rare gems." I burst into laughter. Loud, honest, cathartic. This girl who once confused cubic zirconia with quartz, who thought Tiffany's was a font, not a brand, wanted to enter my industry. I clicked through the site. It was laughable. Generic descriptions, stock photos, misused terminology. They labeled an 18K gold chain as platinum sparkle. A vintage glass brooch was captioned Victorian diamond floral. It took exactly 12 days for the reviews to roll in. They misidentified my Cartier bracelet as fake. Had to take it elsewhere. The appraiser told me my piece was kind of shiny, maybe real. Complete joke. Save your money. This is not a professional service. Sierra had thought that just by copying my business model, she could have what I had. But she missed the most important part. Work, knowledge, obsession with truth. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't need to. Her company quietly shut down within 6 months. Meanwhile, mine? We signed a contract to appraise an entire private museum collection for a Middle Eastern royal family. Confidential value, over $30 million. A year after cutting off all contact, I sat alone on my balcony, glass of wine in hand, watching the glittering skyline of San Francisco pulse in the night. No messages, no Facebook posts, no midnight phone calls dripping with guilt, just peace. And finally I understood this was the real revenge. Not money, not recognition, freedom, the kind of freedom they would never know, because they had chained themselves to entitlement, to ego, to dependency. I had walked away, and I never looked back. Elena's story isn't about greed or vengeance. It's about something far more powerful. Choosing yourself, even when it means walking away from the people who should have loved you the most. She didn't become ruthless. She became free. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is nothing at all. Let them wonder. Let them spiral. Let them regret. You rise.